All right, what I'll do is I'll kick off. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. The idea is to give you an update on our progress with getting MetalNRG relisted on the London main market, moving away from NEX, um, and giving you, more importantly, an overview of where we are with the uranium project, which is something we're all extremely excited about, and also answer any questions that you might have. For those who are not as technical savvy as others, the way you ask questions, you just go on the Q&A in the white box on the web or on the control screen, and you type in your question and ask the question, and it will show up on the screen, and we'll make sure we answer it. Christian Schaffalitzky is here with me this evening. Christian is a non-executive director at MetalNRG, and more importantly, has a very deep understanding of the uranium project and has been involved with it since 2011. So he'll be talking to us a little bit more about that and giving us some more detail on it. So if I kick off with the relisting process, we submitted the first draft of a prospectus to the UKLA in December. Late or mid-December, we received feedback from the UKLA, and they had a few questions. The questions were around additional information on financial information, not so much pertinent to MetalNRG because most of that is in the public domain, but more pertinent to the uranium project. The second area of questions that they had were around the CPRs. Again, not so much on the technical side, but they asked us to address some minor issues around clarifying a few points within the CPR itself. And those are both for uranium as well as gold. We then responded to those queries, submitted a second draft in early January. So we decided not to submit just before Christmas due to the fact that the UKLA was going on holiday anyway. So we resubmitted the second draft in early Jan. We received feedback from them last week, and they've got a few questions around financials. And to give you a bit more context around that, the kind of questions they are asking us are clarification questions. They're not major barriers to getting ourselves relisted. So, for example, there's a pro forma that we have to produce, and that pro forma looks at a balance sheet, current state and future state with the acquisitions of both Goldridge and also the 51% joint venture on uranium, and it looks at the impact on the balance sheet. The accountants and auditors had bundled that together, so Goldridge and uranium were under one heading. The UKLA has asked us to extrapolate that. They've also had some additional questions on CPR. And again, we are currently working with the accountant and auditors as well as the legal team to address those issues. There's a bit of work that we need to do to get all the financials in place and to adjust the various bits and pieces that they've asked us to adjust. And within the next 10 days, we'll get the third draft of this prospectus into them. They then have another 5 days to either accept the prospectus as submitted or come back with additional questions. Based on past experience, I suggest that they're going to come back with some minor questions that we will then address, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize that on the fourth iteration. The lawyers have told me that there are no major barriers to us getting listed on the main market. However, it's a process that we need to go through, and the UKLA is very much in the driving seat in terms of timing of process. So I can't give you an exact timing on it, but I can assure you that from what I'm being told, it should be moving forward quite rapidly. Okay, so are there any questions that anyone has on that particular process? If there are, please type them in. I'll have a look if there are any, but it seems there aren't any. So I'll move on to when will shareholders see the prospectus? The prospectus will be seen by shareholders once it has been signed off by the UKLA, and it's in its final version. At that point, it will become a public document. So if I move on to uranium, and before handing over to Christian, I just wanted to make a few points on uranium at a higher level. If we take, for example, the spot price of uranium, it closed at 28. It closed last year at 28.5 per pound, which is a 25% increase from July 2018. This increase, however, is still off a relatively low base, and the price does still remain below the production curve for a substantial amount of participants in worldwide uranium production. However, if you look at the views that most commentators have for 2019, they anticipate a continued improvement in uranium sectors for a number of reasons. One is that you've got continual acquisition of uranium by financial investors in the UK and in London specifically. We have Yellow Cake, that is a good example. Producers are currently purchasing uranium to meet their delivery obligations because certain mines that are on the higher cost side have been closed, and therefore it's a bit harder to meet those obligations. But again, there are ongoing purchases of uranium. There is an issue around the resumption of procurement activities once the S-232 trade practices investigation in the US has been resolved. But again, there is a continuous contraction of current available inventory. So if you look at the overall picture, there's an increased demand in growth, mostly coming from Russia, China, and the Middle East. So at the high level, pressure is on a price to push the price upwards. The beauty of the project that we're looking at is that even at current prices, where most of the operators are not profitable, the project in the Republic of Kyrgyz is actually profitable, and it is producing or delivering around, it would be delivering around 8 million per annum in profit. So from that perspective, it's a very solid and very financially stable project, and that's why we're so excited about it. I'd hand over at this point to Christian, who'll take you through some more detail on it, and then we'll open up towards the end at the session for additional questions if there are any. Over to you, Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Rolf. Just to put in context, I started working on this in 2011 because Eurasia Mining, you all know it's my day job. I think we were interested in developing this project as a new business direction for the company. And we set it up so that it would be a separate subsidiary of Eurasia in due course. But in the beginning, we would grub stake it, and we would also finance it separately. And we set out to raise $2 million, and then Fukushima happened on the same day that we launched this effort. So we were kind of caught, well, basically caught before we even started. So instead of raising $2 million, which was the commitment, we raised 600,000 and or approximately, and we did some work with that. And then Eurasia decided to leave it for the moment because it had its own work to do, and we hadn't been successful to get it launched at that point. So in the subsequent years, I've remained personally in contact with it, and I've supported Sergei Koklov, the CEO of the company and the main shareholder, throughout that period to keep the project moving along. And we have now, as of December, and just it's being finished off now, the mining license was granted to IMC Invest. That's the name of the company that has the license. And a mining license will be granted as well as an exploration license to continue developing there's new areas to be explored and also some resources to be converted to reserves. And but basically, the existing reserves are built around the assumption of a 250 ton per annum production of uranium, which will be produced using in situ leaching. What that means is that the uranium is hosted in peat. Those of you who have been to Scotland or Ireland will know what it looks like. It's a peat bog is a peat bog, and this is at the surface and going down only to 12 meters. And in situ leach works by taking a leaching solution and putting it into the rock type. In this case, it's peat, and removing the uranium and then concentrating the uranium from that solution. In this case, using ion exchange onto a resin product, and the resin then is sent for refining to a uranium refinery, which just happens to be 60 kilometers down the road. That's one of the reasons why this project is attractive, is because we don't have to build a lot of infrastructure. We're basically producing an intermediate product, and the operating costs include the toll price of sending it down the road to Carabalta, the town that's down the road where this uranium plant is, and producing yellow cake, or U3O8, which is the product which is used in the nuclear power industry. So basically, we've taken it all the way through to mining license. There's a feasibility study completed, which is actually more advanced than a feasibility study, simply because we were able to do actual testing of the in situ recovery process on the site in the field. And it is not just based on lab work, it's based on field work. And so we've seen the performance of the leach solution. The leach solution is not acidic, which would be an environmental issue when you're so close to the surface. A lot of uranium leaching happens several hundred meters down in situ recovery, and therefore is isolated from the surface environment. Here we're at the surface, so you don't really want to be using acid, and in fact we're using what is basically practically the same thing as washing soda, which is sodium bicarbonate and sulfate combination. So basically it's benign from an environmental point of view. It's passed all the tests that would be required for environmental work. The local town is cooperative, and in fact we'll be handing back the project in 10 years' time without any uranium in it. So we're actually cleaning the site, which is not the intent, but that's what we're doing, to remove the uranium for the purposes of producing yellow cake. So in summary, there are two interesting things about it. Rolf has mentioned the low operating cost, and that's true. It basically, because all we're doing is taking the leach solution, pumping it onto the bog, it filters down through the peat profile, it's recovered using collector wells, and then pumped back to a central plant where the leach solution is stripped of its uranium, and then it's recycled. In fact, there will be some makeup of new solution, but basically we can keep using the same leach solution all the time. And we work our way in cells across the area of the bog, of the peat bog that has the reserves of uranium in it. And basically, as most of the uranium comes out quite quickly in the first few days even, and then gradually it eases back in terms of productivity to the point where you're only adding maybe, you take, say, for example, you might take 40% in the first 5 days, and then the next 20% in 5 or 6 days, and so on. And so gradually you remove up to 80%, which is the target for the operation. And then the cell is shut down and you move across to the next area. And we'd run several cells, of course, in parallel. And the other aspect, apart from the low operating cost, it's very simple, is the low capex, because again, there's not a huge amount of equipment required. Most of it is ongoing infrastructural costs. The capex of 8 million estimate is actually life of project, which includes having to do some drilling to take the reserves to resources. So that's to take resources to reserves, which is part of of the operation, which we have 10-year life at the moment on paper, but of course we believe that by adding further exploration and development of the resources and the unexplored parts of the bog, we will be adding up to maybe 15-year life for the project. So that's really it in a nutshell, and I'm happy to take any technical questions. There was one, I did a small presentation very informally a few weeks ago, and the main question I got was, what is this about leaching uranium from peat? Well, actually, it's much easier than leaching it from, say, sandstone or other rock types which are used elsewhere in the world. 50% of uranium in the world is produced from in situ recovery, in situ leaching. And in fact, we have here with bog being with peat being the rock type. You don't perhaps think of it as a rock, but it is effectively the equivalent. And it is really simple to leach. The permeability of the material is simple. The chemistry is even simpler because for those of you who have a chemical bent, I can just say that the bond between the uranium ion atom itself and the peat organic material is very loose, which is why we can use a relatively benign leach solution. And we only just discovered, we've heard a rumor that there was a mine in the past, or at least an operation in the past in the USA in the early 80s, which has operated on peat. And in fact, I've now just received today verbally, I'm looking forward to seeing the documentation as well, because it was never written up academically, but there is some data on it, on where they effectively did a number of different leach tests. The in situ recovery worked, but in fact, they opted to do heap leach instead. So basically, we know it works in any case because we've done the field testing. So I also now can take questions if you want to type them up. I don't know how you do that, but apparently you can type up questions on the screen, and I'll try and answer them. Was there anything else you want me to add, Rolf? Did I cover?
No, I think, and if I may, just in summary, the first point I would make is that it's a very simple technology which has been tested in the field and has delivered results. The second point is that allows, because it's such a simple technology, it allows us to operate at a very low both OPEX and CAPEX. And that is what makes this very, very attractive financially, so that we're producing a substantial profit even at current prices. But I see there's a few questions. Alex is asking if uranium investment opportunities being sought by investors, do you anticipate building a uranium division? Well, we're definitely open to looking at additional uranium, but what we have to recognize here is that not only do we have a mining license, we also have an opportunity to substantially develop the resources that are available to us in the current location. So we would be looking at building that up and building up additional resources in the same location. The questions are coming fast and furious. I'm going to take them one at a time, if I don't may. So the next question is political situation in Kyrgyz Republic and general stability in the region. Christian, you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, that's one of the things I like about Kyrgyzstan. It's actually the only former stan which has actually got a continually elected parliament and president. And there occasionally, when particularly in the early 90s, one of the first couple of presidents were rather, shall we say, inclined to take bonuses for themselves, and that led to quite a big uproar and a little mini revolution where the guy was thrown out, basically, and they would have a new election and replace them. So basically, there is a lot of active politics going on in the country. The society is clannish, and there are something like 37 clans in the country, which effectively is the basis of the parliament. So, you know, it is actually quite democratic. It's quite a democratic country, and the economic performance of the country, they're very poor, generally speaking, compared to other parts of the former Soviet Union. But they have modernized their relationship with the Western world, and incoming and inward investment is welcomed, and there is no problem with repatriating funds or profits from operations in the country.
Can you just, Christian, please comment on the protection that investors in the country get?
Well, I can't remember it. We have it in one of our presentations, and I didn't learn it off by heart. Sorry.
There are amounts of
they've signed up for all the normal things you expect.
That's right. They signed up for a number of the international.
But the international courts, the international arbitration, all those things are valid in the country.
That's right. That's right. So in terms of investors, there's good protection. Andrew, hello, Andrew Neal. Good to see you joining us. Andrew's asking about quality and grades.
Yeah, well, the grade, the average grade for the entire deposit is 350 parts per million, or which is pretty average actually for deposits of this kind. And basically, we have outlined the reserves based on that number. One of the interesting things about in situ recovery, of course, is that it doesn't really care about the grade as long as the uranium is available to be leached. So even at the margins of your, say, we have areas that are up to 1,500, 2,000 ppm, but you know, it's a gradational contact and into areas with, say, as low as 100. And with the test cells, it will leach, you know, pretty well indiscriminately within your test cell. No, it isn't an exact science in that sense. And all I can give you an example of is that the one in situ recovery project I visited in Russia, which was the copper in situ recovery. I asked the guys who were working about the cells that they had finished and what was the recovery versus the reserves. It was 110%. And the reason is that it's leaching copper from outside the sort of scientifically defined edge of the ore body.
Next question is from David Kipling. Hello, David. Good to see you as well. The test will produce 0.19 K. Do you see it, Christian?
I do.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's a rather simplistic way of putting it. But at the end of the day, you know, we were just running it at the scale of the main thing we're trying to test was make sure, and that's the thing that worried me, was how would the porosity and the permeability characteristics of the peat behave with the leach solutions, and could they be recovered? And that was really the most important part of the test. In terms of how the cell was also very small, I should say, it was only, you know, let me think, it was something like 10 meters by 10 meters. And this will be, our actual leach cells will be much, much bigger than that. And we basically worked from first principles to the point of reaching 250 tons per annum. That's how we worked it out, basically. The number of cells, the amount of time, all based on the original test work.
Any other additional questions? Doesn't seem like there are any other.
Over to you, Rolf.
Yeah, no, if there are, I'll give it a few more minutes to see if anyone has any more questions, but otherwise I'll start closing off and saying that one, we're very keen and working extremely hard to get us relisted on the London main market standard segment, and I anticipate that to happen quite rapidly. As I said before, we don't have and we don't see any major barriers. It's purely a matter of process. We're not in full control of the process because the UKLA is quite predominant in managing that, and we are therefore a little bit constrained by their timeframes. But we're very confident that it will happen and it will move forward. In terms of, can you give a loose time scale for your main listing? As I said, Alex, I can't give a time scale on it at this particular stage. I think it would be unfair for me to do so because, as I said, it's the UKLA that's in the driving seat in terms of time frame, and they need to sign off on the various documents that we put forward. From our side, we're making sure that the documents that we're putting forward are being processed and put forward in the best possible manner. I will, and I repeat, there are no major barriers that we can see at this particular point in time, very different to other situations that we've had in the past. So we're very confident that it is purely a matter of process. The uranium project we're extremely excited about, as I said, and as Christian pointed out, for the three reasons: simple technology, very low cost base, simple technology but proven, low cost base, financially very strong proposition with further upside. When do you think the uranium play will bring in any reserves?
Revenues. Yeah.
Revenue, sorry.
Well, if we were to say start the development in the morning, it wouldn't take more than 6 to 8 months to actually set the whole thing up and get going. So revenues would come. In fact, we could begin. You could actually begin by doing a smaller operation and gradually ramp up. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but basically, it's fairly quick. You know, we would have revenues within 6 months of beginning of the project. And in terms of paying back, say, the capex, you can see from our projections on the revenue that it will it'll repay, you know, on a conservative repayment schedule. 18 months will repay the capital.
Okay. Ladies, gentlemen, if there are any more questions, please. Yes, there are. Okay, when you get main listing, uranium operation activated, how do you see growth for 2019? The growth is going to come from a few areas. Once we're listed on the main market, we'll have the uranium project activated. That offers us substantial additional upside development opportunities, which we will be pursuing. The other area that we haven't spoken about today is Gold Ridge in Arizona. The reason we haven't spoken about it is that what we have on our hands is 3 previously producing mines that have reams of information and databases. And we are currently working our way through that and understanding it so that we can actually get a real understanding of everything that's available to us, and then start working on putting the plan together of what needs to be done. So there's additional upside there. And Alex, we are at the same time looking at additional projects. Nothing specific, but we are doing ongoing research and continuously looking at additional projects. So in terms of upside, 1, uranium development, 2, Gold Ridge and news flow will be coming in from Gold Ridge, probably Q2, not Q1, but Q2, because there's a lot of work that we're doing in the background at the moment. And then we are looking at additional projects that will hopefully come through as well.
I see a question there from Andrew Neal.
Yeah.
Basically, when do we get green light from the test results? Well, we have the green light. What happens next is that there are some detail engineering work to be done just for design purposes, and then we're ready to start building the plant. Obviously, we need the money for that, but that's the stage we're at.
We'll wait and see if there's any more questions. Okay. I think, there you go. Name change when we move to LSE. Look, at the moment we're gonna stick to MetalNRG. We're getting to a point where we're known, and it's getting to a point where all of our branding is in and with the MetalNRG logo. So I think we're quite happy to stay where we are at the moment with regard to the name.
And Andrew has another question about how much for the plant. Well, the plant itself, the actual physical part, the building, and the infrastructure around the building is about 3.5 million of the total of 8 over life of project. So that's the big, I suppose, the biggest single item. But I should point out that we do have on paper, I didn't mention this before, and I probably should have, but basically because we haven't signed it, it's not a document that I can put before you. But basically, we did negotiate an offtake agreement with a uranium buyer. He'd take as much as all of it or some of it. The pricing was reasonable, and in fact better than reasonable. But the reason why we didn't sign it is we weren't ready to sign it, simply because if I signed it now, he'd be getting it for free. And basically, I'd like to have a better relationship than that. For example, the offtake agreement would help secure a loan or additional financing in some other form. And therefore, the question you're asking, there's a lot of answers actually. But in principle, the important part will be to have the cash to do the initial, finish the detail engineering and get ready to do the first phase of production, if you like. That would be the best thing to do in the short term.
Yeah, and if I may, the plan there is to make sure that we get sufficient capital in to set up the joint venture with IMC, and then go out to secure the funding, which is both project finance, offtake, and any other form that we will be able to look at. And we'll be doing that funding in conjunction with IMC, and Christian will be a very big part of that because of his extensive knowledge and involvement with the project. A question for the administrators. How do we know when there are no more questions? I wouldn't want to cut anyone off. So.
The administrator tells us, good question.
Good question.
Well, probably
all right.
The best thing to do is probably to say to Share Talk that if people have any follow-up questions, always exactly. Do an email to Rolf or to the company, and we can respond.
Exactly. That's what I was going to suggest. If there are any further questions, please do feel free to send me an email or call me. My mobile is available on the website, and I can be reached pretty much at any time, and be delighted to have a further conversation with anyone who's interested in asking other questions. All right, ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to a great 2019. Thank you.